fluorescent lights of St. Luke's Community Hospital hummed with a dull, persistent drone, casting a sickly greenish pall over everything. Alex Morgan, 14 years old and feeling every bit the awkward, gangly teenager, hated it here. He'd been admitted unexpectedly after a severe bout of pneumonia, whisked away in an ambulance that felt like a prison van. 2 weeks of needles, IV drips, and the pervasive smell of antiseptic had worn him down to a raw nerve. The pediatric ward, occupying the entire first floor of the aging brick building, was a monument to institutional dreariness. Long, wide corridors formed an L shape. If you stood facing the nurses' station, patient rooms lined the left side, while the right housed the station itself. Bathrooms, a communal shower, and 2 small procedure rooms. Alex's room was one of the larger ones, designed for 4 occupants, unlike the isolation rooms at the far end. His temporary roommates, a kid recovering from appendicitis, another with a broken leg, and a quiet boy awaiting tests, had provided some distraction with their stories and shared complaints. But one by one, they'd vanished. Discharged, transferred to surgery, or sent home. Now, for the past 3 nights, Alex was utterly alone in the echoing space. The room felt cavernous, dominated by 4 empty beds with their thin, scratchy blankets and metal-framed nightstands. One entire wall was taken up by an enormous window that stretched nearly from floor to ceiling, a relic from some optimistic architectural past. It offered a bleak view. Beyond a narrow strip of overgrown lawn and a dilapidated chain-link fence, the dense, ancient woods of the Pacific Northwest pressed close. Even during the day, the woods seemed unnervingly dark, swallowing the light. At night, they were an impenetrable wall of shadow. The window itself was a source of unease Alex tried to ignore. It was secured only by an old iron security grill, but someone had long ago broken the padlock meant to keep it fastened. The grill hung loosely, easily pushed open from the outside if someone applied enough force. To open the window itself for air, you had to unlatch and swing inward the smaller upper pane, a flimsy barrier at best. Alex had naively assumed the hospital, staffed by professionals, was a safe haven. How wrong that assumption felt now, alone in the oppressive quiet. The nightly routine involved Nurse Brenda, a woman with tired eyes and a brisk manner, dispensing medications around 9 o'clock. Among them was a small cup of cherry-flavored liquid Benadryl, ostensibly to help the children sleep. Alex had taken it dutifully the first few nights, sinking into a thick, dreamless stupor. Then, Mark Henderson, the kid with the broken leg before he was transferred, had leaned over conspiratorially. "Dude, just dump it. That stuff turns you into a zombie. Not worth it." Alex, craving some semblance of normal alertness, had taken the advice. For the past week, the pink liquid had gone straight down the sink drain. He felt more awake, more himself. But the trade-off was the return of the hospital's unsettling noises and his own racing thoughts in the dead of night. Tonight, the solitude felt heavier. Alex lingered at the deserted nurses' station long after lights out, flipping half-heartedly through an old crossword puzzle book Brenda had left out. The usual nighttime sounds, distant beeping, muffled voices, the groan of pipes, seemed amplified in the stillness. The relative calm was shattered by a sudden commotion from down the hall. Raised, agitated voices, a sharp bang, then the frantic patter of bare feet on linoleum. Mark, looking pale and wide-eyed, skidded around the corner towards the station. Nurse Brenda emerged from the small office behind the counter, frowning. "Mark Henderson, what on earth is going on? You're supposed to be in bed." Mark was breathing hard. Someone's outside, at the window, in room 107. Outside? What do you mean? Brenda asked, her voice tight with concern. We heard tapping, Mark gasped, leaning on the counter. Just light at first. Billy thought it was maybe Sarah from the girls' wing messing around. He got up to look, pulled back the curtain a bit. Then he jumped back like he'd been shocked, cursing up a storm. We all rushed to the window, pulled the curtain open, and there was this guy, right up against the glass, filthy, pale as a ghost, just rubbing his face on it. Like an animal? Alex felt a chill prickle his skin. Outside? But how? The fence? The grill? The grill wasn't locked, Mark insisted, his voice trembling. It was just hanging open. Thank God we'd closed the window earlier because of the wind, or he could have just climbed right in. Brenda's expression turned grim. She snatched up the phone. Security, this is Nurse Brenda in pediatrics. We have a report of an intruder on the grounds, possibly attempting to access room 107 through the window. Immediate check of the perimeter required. Hanging up, she grabbed a heavy-duty flashlight. All right, both of you, stay calm. Let's go see. Her tone brooked no argument. Alex followed Brenda and Mark down the dimly lit corridor. Room 107 was occupied by 3 younger boys, all huddled together on one bed, looking terrified. Brenda strode to the window, shining her powerful beam out into the darkness. The light cut through the rain-lashed night, sweeping across the wet grass, the sagging fence, and the menacing wall of trees beyond. It illuminated nothing but swaying branches and the skeletal shadows they cast. See anything? Mark whispered to Alex. Alex shook his head, peering intently. Nothing, just trees and rain. Brenda scanned for a full minute before lowering the flashlight. Nothing there now, boys. Probably just some vagrant seeking shelter from the storm, startled Billy. Security will sweep the area. Back to bed, all of you. Try to settle down. Her voice was firm, but Alex detected a faint tremor beneath the professional veneer. The security guard, a burly man named Dave, arrived shortly after, dripping wet. He conferred quietly with Brenda, then did another circuit outside with his own light. He returned, shaking his head. No sign of anyone, Nurse Brenda. Grounds are clear. Must have bolted when he heard the commotion. I'll note it in the log. Relief washed over Mark and the boys in 107, but it did little for Alex. He walked back to his own solitary room, the silence now feeling charged, hostile. The wind howled like a hungry thing outside, rattling the loose grill on his own window. Rain lashed against the glass. The streetlights beyond the fence cast long, dancing shadows of tree branches across the walls and ceiling of his room, making the empty beds seem like crouching figures. Sleep was impossible. He lay rigid, staring at those shifting shadows, his mind replaying Mark's description. Filthy, pale as a ghost, rubbing his face on the glass. Where was that padlock? Why was the grill so insecure? He cursed himself again for skipping the Benadryl. Oblivion would have been welcome. The digital clock on the wall clicked over to 1:30 a.m. Alex's eyes, gritty with exhaustion, kept being drawn to a particular patch of shadow near his window. It seemed denser, less fluid than the dancing tree limbs. It didn't move with the wind, but against it. A slow, deliberate shifting. He squeezed his eyes shut, burying his face in the thin pillow. Don't look. It's just stress, lack of sleep, the storm. But the primal pull of fear was stronger. He forced his eyes open. There it was, defined against the lesser darkness outside. Not a branch, a human silhouette, standing unnervingly still, facing his window. Ice flooded Alex's veins. No one sane would be out there in this weather, at this hour. staring into a hospital window. This wasn't a vagrant seeking shelter. This was deliberate. Terror held him frozen for long seconds, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. Then, a spark of anger ignited. Anger at his own fear, anger at the violation. It's just some creep, probably drunk or high. Gritting his teeth, he pushed himself up slowly. The ancient bed springs shrieked in protest. His bare feet touched the cold linoleum. Where were his slippers? He couldn't find them in the gloom. Forget it. He forced his legs to move, each step an effort against the leaden weight of dread. He crept towards the window, the silhouette becoming clearer, more defined with every hesitant step. It was a man, hunched slightly, motionless, staring right at where Alex had been lying. 5 agonizing steps brought him within arm's reach of the curtain. His mind raced. Call for help? Run? What does he want? The figure outside didn't move. Alex's hand trembled as he reached for the edge of the heavy, pale yellow curtain. He steeled himself, then yanked it aside with a sudden jerk. Nothing, just the rain-streaked glass, the distorted view of the fence and the thrashing trees beyond, illuminated by the sodium glare of the streetlight. No figure, no sign of anyone. Had it been a trick of the light? A waking nightmare born of exhaustion and Mark's story? A shaky, almost hysterical laugh escaped him. You idiot, freaking yourself out over shadows. He reached for the latch to secure the small upper pane, then froze. It was already unlatched. The window was open a crack, maybe an inch or two, letting in a frigid stream of air that raised goosebumps on his arms. Did I forget to close it? Did I? He couldn't remember. The oversight felt monumental, stupid. Panic surged again. He fumbled for the latch, his fingers clumsy with cold and residual fear. He slammed the small pane shut, twisting the latch firmly. Safe. It's closed. Safe. He turned to shuffle back to his bed, the cold floor biting his feet, and that's when he felt it. An intense, prickling sensation between his shoulder blades, the undeniable feeling of being watched from inside the room. His breath hitched, every muscle locked. His legs felt like waterlogged logs. The air suddenly seemed thicker, colder, carrying a faint, sickly sweet odor beneath the antiseptic hospital smell, like spoiled meat left in the sun. He could almost feel the presence behind him, a pressure in the darkened space. He heard it then, a slow, shuffling step, then another. Soft, wet sounds on the linoleum. Schlep, schlep. Flight instinct finally overpowered paralysis. Alex whirled around, a cry strangling in his throat. The room behind him was empty. Just the empty beds, the nightstands, the dancing shadows on the walls. The only sound was the drumming rain and the wind moaning around the building. Stress, exhaustion, he whispered hoarsely to himself, wiping cold sweat from his forehead. Just freaking shadows and wind noises. Shaking violently, he stumbled back to his bed, burrowing under the thin blanket, pulling it over his head like a child, his back firmly to the terrifying window. He willed sleep to come, focusing on the rhythmic pounding of his own heart. He didn't know how long he slept. It felt like minutes, maybe hours. He awoke abruptly, not to a sound, but to a primal sense of wrongness. The room was pitch black, the storm still raging outside. His eyes strained, adjusting slowly. Then he saw movement, low to the ground, near the far corner, opposite the door. Something was crawling across the floor towards his bed. Alex's blood turned to ice. Every hair on his body stood rigid. He tried to scream, but only a dry, choked rasp escaped his constricted throat. He could only watch, paralyzed with terror, as the thing moved with a horrifying, jerky slowness. It reached a patch of dim light cast through the window by the distant street lamp. It was a man, or had been. Naked, his skin was a dreadful, waxy pale, stretched taut over protruding bones. Dark, mottled bruises. Or were they something else? Something internal and necrotic. Bloomed across his torso and limbs like grotesque flowers. His face was a mask of slack-jawed vacancy, mouth hanging open in a silent, perpetual gasp. His eyes were milky, unfocused, yet somehow fixed on Alex. A thin trail of viscous, dark fluid glistened on the linoleum behind him, emanating that cloying, rotten stench that now filled the room, thick enough to taste. Schlep, schlep. The sound was the creature's limbs dragging through the foul residue. He was halfway across the room now. Alex's body trembled uncontrollably. His teeth chattered. The thing raised a skeletal, bruised arm, its fingers curling like claws, reaching towards the edge of Alex's bed. Its mouth worked silently, emitting only a faint, wet gurgle. The stench intensified, making Alex's stomach heave. A deafening crack of thunder split the night, shaking the window panes. The sudden violence jolted Alex from his frozen horror. Survival instinct screamed. With a desperate, feral cry he didn't know he could make, he launched himself sideways off the bed, hitting the cold floor hard and scrambling backwards on his hands and heels. The creature's head snapped towards him, those milky eyes seeming to lock on. It began to push itself up, its movements unnervingly swift now. Alex scrambled to his feet, slipping in his own panic. He lunged for the door, fingers fumbling wildly with the simple thumb latch. Click. It gave. He wrenched the door open. As he plunged into the brighter hallway light, he felt it, a cold, rough touch like wet leather scraping against his bare forearm. He looked down. A smear of dark, viscous slime and something reddish-brown. Blood stained his skin where the creature's fingers had brushed him. Bile surged into his throat. He gagged, staggering. He didn't look back. He ran. His legs, numb moments before, now carried him with frantic speed down the long corridor, away from the room, away from the crawling horror. He skidded around the corner towards the nurse's station and the bathrooms. The only sanctuary he could think of was the small patient bathroom near the shower room. He slammed the door shut behind him, ramming the flimsy lock home, and collapsed against the cold tile wall, sliding down to the floor. He hugged his knees, staring wide-eyed at the locked door, trembling uncontrollably, the foul smell still clinging to his arm, the cold, clammy touch imprinted on his skin. He stayed there, curled into a ball on the frigid floor, listening to the storm rage and his own ragged sobs, waiting for the first gray light of a dawn that felt impossibly far away. He didn't know how long he waited, shivering in the stark, tiled silence of the bathroom. The storm had lessened to a steady downpour. Eventually, a sharp, insistent rapping jolted him from his exhausted stupor. "Alex? Alex Morgan, are you in there? Open this door immediately!" It was Nurse Brenda's voice, sharp with annoyance and concern. Terror warred with overwhelming relief. Slowly, stiffly, Alex pushed himself up. His legs protested. He reached for the lock with a trembling hand, hesitated for a second, then pulled it back. The door swung open. Brenda stood there, arms crossed, flanked by a concerned-looking orderly and a couple of bleary-eyed patients woken by the commotion. Her expression of irritation faltered as she took in Alex's state. Pale as parchment, eyes wide and bloodshot, shivering violently in just his hospital gown, a dark, drying smear staining his forearm. Good heavens, child. What on earth? Brenda started, then her eyes narrowed, focusing on his arm. Is that blood? Alex, what happened? What were you doing in there? Why is there... She trailed off, peering past him into the bathroom. Then her gaze snapped back towards his room down the hall. Her face paled visibly. Oh, dear Lord. Alex followed her horrified gaze. The hallway floor near his open door was smeared with the same dark, viscous trail he'd seen inside his room, leading out into the corridor. It wasn't me, Alex managed to croak, his voice raw. The blood, it's not mine. I don't feel good. The world tilted violently, the stark fluorescent lights, Brenda's shocked face, the concerned murmurs of the onlookers. Everything blurred and swam. The last thing he felt was the orderly's strong arms catching him as his legs gave way. Then merciful darkness swallowed him. He woke hours later in a different room, one of the small, single-bed isolation rooms at the far end of the ward. Sunlight streamed weakly through a much smaller, securely latched window. Nurse Brenda was checking his IV. Her usual briskness was gone, replaced by a wary gentleness. How are you feeling, Alex? She asked softly. Tired, he whispered. Scared. He looked at his arm. The smear was gone, cleaned, but the skin felt unnaturally cold where it had been. Brenda followed his gaze. You gave us quite a fright. You had a fever spike. Probably just a bad reaction, stress, nightmares. But her eyes didn't quite meet his. They held a shadow of something else. Fear, confusion, disbelief. He spent his remaining 3 days in the isolation room. The hospital was abuzz with hushed, unsettling rumors that drifted even to his secluded corner. Whispers about the county morgue attached to the basement level of St. Luke's. A body had apparently gone missing the previous night. A John Doe brought in after being found in the woods, suspected exposure. Unidentified, unclaimed. The official line was a mix-up in paperwork, a transfer error. But the whispers among the night cleaning staff were different. The refrigeration unit door found slightly ajar, muddy footprints on the linoleum leading towards the service elevator. Footprints that matched no one on staff. They said the John Doe was rumored to be connected to some unsolved disappearances in the area, a drifter suspected of terrible things, though never caught. Alex heard the whispers, saw the sideways glances from some staff. He said nothing. He couldn't. The memory of that crawling figure, the smell, the cold touch on his arm, it was etched into his mind with acid clarity. Was it the missing John Doe? A vengeful spirit? Something else entirely? The thought that it might have been a real, escaped corpse was somehow more horrifying than any ghost story. It meant the world wasn't just scary, it was violently, inexplicably broken. The official silence, the hushed rumors, the way Brenda avoided his eyes, it all confirmed a truth too ugly to voice. He focused on the sunlight outside his new, smaller window, counting the hours until discharge, praying only that the woods beyond the fence stayed firmly on the other side of the glass. He never told anyone the full story. Some terrors were best left locked away, festering in the dark corners of memory, far safer than the cold reality of a hospital corridor stained with something unspeakable.